moment to breathe. Grab a beverage or two. We got professional guests with lots of stories for you. So take a seat right here and join us on Careers Over Beers.
Welcome to Careers Over Beers podcast. This episode is sponsored by Boot Hill Distillery. They gave me a cool hat. You can see that right there, Boot Hill Distillery. So they're located in Dodge City, Kansas, and they're a true soil-to-sip distillery. They make vodka, gin, whiskey, and cocktails, and you can find them in any local liquor store in Kansas, or you can go to their distillery in Dodge City to get the full experience. So thank you, Boot Hill, for that. Thank you for the merch. Today, we're drinking one of my favorite beers, actually, Fat Tire.
Fat Tire.
And that's this gentleman's favorite beer as well. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Thanks, Jesse, for having me on. My name's Kurt Reichenberger, and I'm an airline pilot for United Airlines.
That's cool. That's one of the coolest jobs that I've had on, for sure.
Well, I think it's pretty cool.
I do, too.
Oh, good.
It's actually one of my most requested jobs to interview is a pilot.
Oh,
and
wow.
especially a commercial pilot. You know? So let's go ahead and get into these Fat Tires.
All right.
Fat Tire's your favorite beer?
Yep.
It is a delicious beer. It's definitely one of my favorites. One of my go-tos when I'm feeling kind of fancy. Get away from the light beers.
Yeah.
You know?
Yep.
So, well, cheers, Kurt. Yes, sir. So, you're a United Airlines pilot.
Yes.
Tell me how that began.
Well, so I've been there about 24 years, as a matter of fact, coming up on my 24th anniversary here in about a month. I actually started with the airline business with Continental Airlines back in 98, and through the early 2000s after 9/11 happened, all the airlines were struggling financially, and so they merged together, and Continental and United kind of merged together. So that's how I kind of ended up at the United portion of it. Yeah.
Did you know from the start, though, that you wanted to become a commercial pilot, or were you just looking to become your own personal pilot?
No, I when I started, I wanted to fly for a living. I wanted to be a pilot. You know, that's what I wanted my profession to be. As far as an airline pilot, I wasn't necessarily set my goals on that. I actually, before I started the airline business, I flew for a Fortune 50 oil company in Houston, Texas. I spent 9 years with them flying around the world for them, flying their executives around. Enjoyed that very much, but over time it got to be where I was gone too much, and I just kind of got a little frustrated with it and decided, the opportunity came for the airline business, and it's a little more on a schedule, and I thought that would be better for my family. So that's kind of the way that I went.
Were those smaller planes when you were flying for that?
Yeah, they're smaller planes, but it's kind of relative. They're smaller. I mean, the biggest one we had would seat maybe 14 or 15 people. But they were pretty good size. They were luxury. They had sleeper beds in them. They had 2 bathrooms. They had a kitchen. So they were set up very nice. But yeah, they weren't as big as the airline stuff.
It'd be nice to have one of those, wouldn't it?
Yeah, that would be very nice. Yeah.
So, is it scarier flying I almost said driving. Is it scarier flying a bigger plane than a smaller plane?
Well, no, I don't think it's scarier. I think what it is, you feel like there's a little more responsibility because you have maybe 250 or 300 people sitting behind you that are counting on you to get them there safely. And so I think there's a little more stress involved in that. But as far as flying the airplane, really no different.
So like when you're going through pilot's training and everything, you're probably flying on some small airplanes at first.
Yeah.
When you were going up in scale and size, it didn't get any scarier at all? Like the first time you sat behind not scarier.
Different.
Yeah.
Different. The speeds start to change. The complexity changes quite a bit. So when you start out, you start in maybe a two-seater Cessna 152. You do all your primary flight training in that, and then maybe you step up to a 4-seater, and you start training in that, and then you go from that to maybe a twin-engine turboprop airplane. So each time you step up, it gets a little faster, it gets a little more complicated. And then by the time you get to the jets and the high-performance turbine engines, it gets just a little more complicated, not scarier. I mean,
but it's gradual. It sounds like
it's very
it gets
gradual.
more and more complicated, probably.
Yeah. And every time you change, you go through a big training cycle to do it. So to go to a jet of any sort, even me now, if I changed airplanes, I would have to go to a 6 to 8 week school on that airplane specific. And train on that airplane.
No kidding.
Yeah. So for the airlines, we only fly one type rating at a time. We only fly one type of airplane at a time. Now, when I flew for the oil company, I would fly 3 or 4 different types at a time, and that was a bit of a challenge too, because you were constantly changing the size of the airplane, the speed of the airplane, how it operated. The basic flying is the same, but it's just the complexity of the airplane is different. So,
what's the plane that you fly now?
The Boeing 787.
787.
Yeah, it's international long haul. We have 3 different variants. They seat anywhere from about 240 people on the smallest one to, I think it's a little over 300 on the biggest one. And they can change that seating configuration all the time. I mean, it is constantly changing. They'll take seats out, they'll put seats in, depending on the mission. But right now, that's about what we have.
So that's a big plane.
Pretty good size. Yeah, it's all international, long haul. There's some. It does fly some domestically, but for the most part, it flies overseas.
And when you jump in that thing, it's just another day? It's just like a person getting in their car for work in the morning and driving? Is it all second nature?
Yeah. It's not, you've done it enough times. There's many steps that you've got to go through from the time you start to the time you get into the airplane to the time you actually take off and make your trip. But yeah, it's like another day. Yeah.
So crazy to me. It's you always, especially when I'm flying through an airport, I'll go up and you can look in the cockpit when you are walking in, see all those, there's like 1,000 different switches and controls. I'm like, what the hell is all that?
Yeah.
What does that all do?
Right. There's lots there. That's why it takes 6 to 8 weeks to go through and learn what each one of those switches does. And each one of those switches, not all of them, but a lot of them can do multiple things, so you've got to know in each circumstance what the switch might do. So yeah, it's a lot.
So when you're sitting there in the cockpit and you have all these switches and everything around you, you know exactly what everything does?
Yes. There are a few switches that are tagged for maintenance only, and so I know about what they do, but I don't use them, and so I don't mess with them. But for the most part, yeah, every switch that we use and need to know, we know what it does. Yeah.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
I like watching videos on YouTube and on Facebook or TikTok or whatever of pilots when they're doing landings and takeoffs. It's just cool to me to see.
Yeah.
Especially when it's like real windy and I'll see them like the steering wheel's going like up and down, back and forth. I'm like, holy crap, that's kind of freaky.
It is, but it really becomes, after a little bit, becomes second nature. You're moving that yoke, without hardly even thinking about it. As the airplane does something, you're making a correction before you're even thinking about it. So it's kind of like riding a bike. When you go around a corner, you don't really think about going around the corner. What you got to do to go around the corner, you just kind of do it, and that's kind of what stuff like that is becomes second nature. Yeah, just another day.
What's your favorite part of the flight?
Well,
taking off.
The landings are as far as the actual flight portion, I think the most challenging, and that's probably the most gratifying to do. And so there's always a big challenge, and you don't get every one of them perfect, and sometimes you put it on pretty good, and you get a little razzing from the other guys that are in the cockpit, that wasn't that good. But it's satisfying when you do a nice smooth landing, and the people in the back will let you know that, oh, that was great. And sometimes the flight attendants always let you know whether it was good or bad.
So, will they?
Yes. Yeah, they're
like, man, you're kicking us around up here, Kurt.
Yeah. And if it's a bad landing, and they'll go, whose landing was that? Whether it was mine or the other guys. And, if it was really bad, you always blame it on the other guy. If it was really good, you always say, oh, that was mine.
Yeah. I was getting coffee. That was the other pilot.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Speaking of which, what do you guys do in the cockpit when you're on a long flight? Because it kicks into autopilot, doesn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then you're just chilling up there.
Well, Yeah, it's that's the I would say probably the boring part of the flight, I guess. You have things to do. I mean, you have radios to people to talk to, air traffic control you're talking to all the time.
Mm-hmm.
You have, on longer flights, you have a maintenance log and a flight log that you keep, and you have to do that. But there's times when you're just sitting there monitoring, and that can become easy to be complacent.
Mm-hmm.
But you've got you got a lot of people in the back counting on you, so you're always kind of checking the weather at places, making sure if you have a problem, what you're going to do, always knowing where you're at. And the places that we fly across the Atlantic, there's not a lot of airports, so we're very cognizant of which airports have the ability to let us land there if we have a problem.
Yeah, if you have like an emergency,
Yes.
and you need to land or turn around, there's
Yes.
probably a point there in the middle of the ocean where it's
There is a what we
hours?
call a critical point. Could be two of them, but it tells us, and our dispatcher sends this all to us. So on our paperwork, it tells us, okay, up to this point, you're going to go back and land at this airport if the weather's good there. Once you get past that point, you're going on ahead to the next airport, wherever that might be. And when you get to the next point, then you change airports again. So yes, on the longer flights. Now, domestically, you don't have to do that because there's airports
everywhere.
Yeah. So
And land.
It's easy to, if you got a problem, you can get down on the ground very quickly. Whereas we have flights that can take that could take up to 4 hours. You could fly for 4 hours to get to that airport. So if you had a problem, and the only real issue is a fire. That's the biggest issue.
Like if it was there's a lot of emergency landings that happen, but it's not really an emergency in the sense that the plane is going to crash.
Right.
But if there was one where the plane was going to crash, you would have to land on the ocean, wouldn't you?
Well,
or try to.
Yeah, if that was
Do a Captain Solely.
If that was what was if that was all that was left, and you didn't have either engine, you couldn't go anywhere. Yes, that's what you'd have to try to do.
That's what's cool about planes, modern planes anyways, is that there's no single point of failure, right? If one engine goes out, you still have the other.
Well, yeah, on a twin-engine airplane, and they fly. They're certified to fly on one engine just as well as, not just as well, but they can fly perfectly fine on one engine.
Mm-hmm.
So you can lose an engine, and you could fly that 4 hours on the other engine. Now you can't fly as high and you can't fly as fast, and so, but you could still get to that airport 4 hours away if you needed to. Yeah.
Pretty cool stuff.
Yeah. So the only big issue is if for some reason you had a total engine failure,
Mm-hmm.
or if you had a fire that was uncontrollable inside the cabin. Now we have cargo fire compression systems that, if there's a fire in the cargo hold, we can fight that fire.
And the flight attendants are probably trained as well to fight fires,
yeah.
aren't they?
Oh yeah.
If there was one that breaks out.
Yep.
We don't allow smoking on planes anymore, though.
Nope.
So
Not supposed to.
Did you ever fly when they allowed smoking on planes?
Yes. Yeah. Early on in my career, there was still smoking that you could smoke.
Isn't that kind of crazy?
Yeah.
Looking back on it now.
Oh yeah, I couldn't take it. I'm not a smoker, so I'm assuming if you're a smoker, it's tough to spend 12 hours in the air and not be able to have a cigarette. But yeah, I couldn't do it.
It's crazy though to think back, because I never got to experience that. But thinking about people were just smoking in the plane, when
you watch the old movies and you see them, they have their little, and then they went to a smoking section, where if you were in the back of the airplane, you could smoke.
Did they?
Yeah, and I guess that didn't work very well, but yeah, now it's no smoking.
You know what they should do is, it's probably against the what is that, the FAA? It's probably against the rules now, but I was going to say there should be an airliner out there that just is only smoking.
They might be able to get away with something like that. I don't know.
I know a lot of the chairs, there's still like ashtrays sometimes in the armrests. If it's an older plane.
Right. Yeah, they'll still have some of that, but yeah, no smoking.
Speaking of which, older planes. What do you as pilots prefer? Do you prefer the older planes that you were trained on at the beginning, or I guess yours are probably all the same now, like you said, but there are some planes out there that are like decades old, aren't there?
Yeah,
that airlines still use.
There are, but most of the U.S. airlines don't fly any of the really old airplanes anymore. Everything is glass cockpits. We don't have any of the old round dial instruments anymore. Everything's glass. Everything's pretty modern. Now, the newer airplanes have some of the latest and greatest features on them, just like the newer cars have. And so I prefer that. The 787 is the newest airplane we have, and it's a great airplane. It's got all the
latest and greatest gadgets, gizmos in it.
Yeah, and it's comfortable and it's quiet, and so I prefer that. I wouldn't want to go back to flying what I originally started on. Yeah.
It's kind of like vehicles, If you look at a car from the 90s, the controls and everything just look dated. And you see a new car, and everything is like...
And you got your big screen up there, and you go, how could I drive without that? And your moving map and all that sort of stuff. And it's the same way in an airplane, yeah. Well, the old airplanes didn't have any of that stuff.
It's not push to start, though, right?
Well, no. It's not push to start. But the airplane I'm on is pretty good. We hit a starter button, and then we put the fuel to it, and then it starts itself. So, and if it has a problem, it shuts itself down. So we don't touch anything. The older airplanes, you did the same thing, but then you had to monitor it. And if you had an issue, you had to shut the engine down. So that's kind of one of the better gadgets, I guess you'd say. Yeah.
Are you guys going full power when you're on the runway taking off?
Normally not.
No?
No. Because it's hard on the engines. So they have the full power if you need it, if you're on a short runway. So everything's based on how long the runway is, how high altitude you are at taking off, or what the temperature is outside. So a lot of factors affect takeoff and how much you weigh. And then we decide how much power and take off with reduced power if we want. Now, we can use full power if we want. But our company would prefer us to take off with, as long as we meet our specifications for the runway, to take off and save on the engine life, and just easier on the airplane. A lot less chance of, it's kind of like starting out in a car. You start out slowly, your engine's going to be fine, but if you floor it and...
Yeah, you don't want to floor it.
Yeah, and wrap up the engine, and then it's probably going to be hard on it over time. Yeah.
Yeah, pretty interesting stuff. And I actually had somebody explain turbulence to me really well one time. They said that you could just think of it as like bumps in the road.
Yeah.
When you're driving a car.
Yeah.
I mean, that's really nothing to worry about, right?
For the most part.
It gets crazy, I guess, but
yeah. I mean, the airplanes are made to withstand almost any kind of turbulence. So the airplane won't fall apart, but it can if you get into some bad turbulence, it can knock some people around if you're not buckled in. It can hurt some flight attendants, and our flight attendants get hurt every once in a while. Sometimes the job is a little dangerous for them because they're standing around, and if you don't know it's coming, we've had some flight attendants that break a leg, break a hip.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, because they're standing. It's hard.
I mean, they probably have it pretty good as far as predicting the weather and predicting wind changes, but it's not perfect.
It's not perfect. And when you get into the really severe turbulence, a lot of times you don't know it's coming. It's not something you see coming. So, lighter turbulence, sometimes we know it's there, sometimes we don't, but it's not a big deal. But when you get into the heavier stuff, it can be dangerous.
Bump you around?
Yeah.
Does it bump you guys around up there in the front too?
Yeah, it can. That's why we wear our seatbelts all the time. We're required to wear our seatbelts all the time. And that's why we try to tell passengers, sitting in the back, I know it's not always the most comfortable, but try to wear your seatbelt because we don't always know it's coming, and you can get hurt.
So even when you guys say seatbelt sign is off, you're still buckled up front?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah, we're required to be buckled all the time.
You guys do a good job at keeping the people calm, though, when you get on the intercom and talk,
Oh, well, that's good.
I always notice that about pilots. It's like no matter how bad the turbulence is or anything, you guys always come on and you're like, hey, guys, a little bit of bumps there, but...
Yeah. Well, the people in the back don't do it, for most of the part, don't do it all that often, and so a little bump feels like a lot to them. Or a little bump to us is just kind of just another day.
Yeah.
And so it doesn't bother us that much. And, I mean, I think maybe in my career, maybe 3 or 4 times I've been in turbulence enough to really go, wow, that was a bit scary.
Really?
Yeah.
Have you had some close calls with anything like that the passengers didn't know about, where you're up front you're like, holy crap, that was crazy?
No, I don't think so. Nothing
that was like life-threatening at all?
No. I mean, no, I don't think so.
But you have had moments where you're in the front and you guys are like, wow.
Yeah.
That was rough.
For like turbulence, yeah, you just go, wow, man, that was, don't want to hit that again.
No moments, though, where you're genuinely scared. Like,
no.
This flight's going down.
No. Thank goodness. Thank goodness. Now, if I were on the, Sully's airplane and the landing on the Hudson and hit the birds, that would probably have scared me a bit.
Yeah, how did that happen? Did the birds go through both engines and kill them both?
Yes, they went through both engines. There was a flock of geese and went through both engines. They didn't see them coming. I think they saw them, but it was too late to do anything. It was a big flock, went through both engines and killed power on both engines. So they had no choice but to go. They were going down somewhere. And I don't know if you've been to New York City or New Jersey. It's, buildings everywhere, roads everywhere, everything's everywhere, and they couldn't get to an airport, so they had one choice, and that was
river.
The river, and hope for the best. And if the best didn't happen, you're only killing the people, you and the people on the airplane. If you try to land on a road or, in a
you could
part of a
potentially
city,
bring in a bunch of other lives.
You're going to kill a whole bunch of people. Yeah.
Do you think it was? Sorry, go ahead.
I think they did a good job, yeah.
Well, yeah, they made a movie about it. He did so good,
Yes, they did.
Do you think that was a rough landing on the water like that, or did it just kind of slide in?
I don't. The little video that I've seen on it looked pretty smooth. I mean, I think they did a great job getting it down without, because it's easy to hit the tail first and then go into the nose, and I've never done it, so I can't really say.
Right.
but I could see a lot of potential for disaster there.
Yeah.
And I think he did a fantastic job.
It's a crazy story.
Yeah.
I can't imagine what it was like on that flight.
I can't either.
I don't know if the passengers were fully aware. Like, if that's happening,
I think they were. I mean, I mean, the only thing I know is from the movie. Mm-hmm. But I think they were pretty aware. I mean, both engines go out and smoke's coming out the back end of them. They know they're
You can't
going
really
down.
hide that.
Yeah, they know they're going down. It's just a matter. They don't know where.
Normally, though, like if you're out in the middle of the Midwest or something, would you be trying to land on a field or something like that?
Well,
or there might even be an airstrip. I mean, they're all over the place.
Yeah, you try to find a runway close enough to land at, and but if need be, you'd pick a big open field if you could and hope for the best. So you're probably, I don't know if you remember United Airlines, and I don't remember the flight was, and I don't even remember the year for sure, but it was a DC-10 that was going from Denver to Chicago. And they had an engine that blew out. It's a 3-engine airplane. Engine blew out and took out all their hydraulics, so they couldn't control the airplane. More than with the throttles, and they had no rudders, no flight controls or anything like that. They ended up having to put it down. But they found an airport in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, I think, or something like that. Mm-hmm. And they did basically a crash landing. Now, they killed a bunch of people, but a bunch of people lived from it too. So that would be what you'd probably end up doing, is something like that. Try to find a runway of some sort somewhere.
That's kind of scary that can happen. It just took away all flight controls?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. I think some changes were made after that to keep that from ever. But they said, it was something like a 1 in a billion chance that something like that could happen. Yeah. And this is the one time it did. Yeah.
That's what keeps me, anxiety free, is when I'm going on a flight or whatever and I get a little nervous, I'll just look up statistics, and it's just so much safer statistically than anything else, any other form of travel.
Yeah. So I got like 24,000 flight hours, and in that time I've had hardly anything major happen. Little things, but nothing major. So it's pretty safe.
Just look at the amount of flights going on every day around the world.
Right.
And you hear about it when it happens, but it's rare even then.
Right. Yeah.
And the 737 MAX, that was like a mechanical failure too, I believe. But
yeah.
Did you ever fly a 737 MAX?
I never flew the MAX. I flew the 737s.
Yeah.
But I had gotten off that airplane by the time the MAX came out.
Yeah.
So I don't really know that much about it. Mm-hmm. What happened in the accidents. they definitely had an issue of some sort. But I don't know that much about it really.
Yeah, hopefully it's worked out.
Yeah, I think it has, or they wouldn't. I think they've made the necessary changes.
When that was going on, were you guys as pilots like, what the hell's happening here? Were you talking amongst yourselves about it? Because really at the beginning there was no idea what happened before they found those black boxes.
Right. Yeah. Oh, of course. Anytime there's an accident, anywhere in the world that you find out about, you always try to find out what happened. You try to learn from it. Try to make sure you don't make those same mistakes if a mistake was made, or if something happened, and you always kind of go, well, what would have I done? What could have I done? What would have I done differently? And so you try to learn from it if you can. So
it's pretty cool though, going back to Sully's thing, like the fact that you can lose both engines and you can still glide it down to a landing, right?
Oh yeah, yeah. They as long as you got the airspeed, they'll still fly, but they're just going to slowly come down.
So if you're at cruising altitude and all of a sudden both engines gone, you could still cruise that thing down to a landing. Yeah, if you found a place.
If you found a place, and then to give you a reference, I'm just kind of going off the top of my head here, but you could probably drift, was what we'd call it. You'd probably drift maybe as much as 120 or 30 miles. So you could go quite a ways if you're at altitude. So you could go a ways and find an airport, especially domestically. You could find something. Yeah, but an airplane losing both engines doesn't happen very often.
No.
Especially an airline.
Yeah. I mean, everything's checked. When that plane is landed, there's maintenance checks on it too, right?
Every time.
Every single time?
Every single time. The maintenance goes over the airplane, checks things. We as a pilot will do our walk-arounds and check things. So it's looked over a number of times before you take it out on the next flight.
Yeah. Now, what is your guys' schedule like when you're working day to day? I mean, I don't know how many hours you guys even work or anything. What does that all look like?
Well, it's different for each airplane is a little bit different. The narrow body airplanes, the 737s and the Airbuses that fly domestically, they work a few more days a month than say the long haul international guys do. So the trips are different. So depending on what airplane you fly, your week is completely different. So on what I fly, I'm usually gone 3 days. I usually fly to Europe or maybe Asia, and I do that once a week. So I might leave on Monday morning, go fly to Frankfurt, Germany, come back on Wednesday morning, come back home on Wednesday evening. And that's my week. And I would do that trip I do every week. So
you'll have a day there too?
Well, usually I have 24 hours. So you fly all night getting there, usually.
How long is the flight to Germany?
Say to Germany is usually about 9 hours of flight time.
Okay.
So we'll leave at 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon maybe, and we'll get into Germany at 10 o'clock in the morning, 11 o'clock, we'll go to the hotel. You haven't slept all night, so you usually go sleep a little bit. You get up, go have some dinner, go back to bed, sleep. And if you want to get out and go see something, you've got some time. And then the next day you'll leave about the hotel maybe 10 or 11 o'clock in the morning, go to the airport, fly back home.
Yeah.
Yeah. So usually I have about 24 hours on the ground.
And that's unique to your specific flight plan.
That's unique to what I do now. So if you're flying a 737, those guys might show up Monday morning at 7 o'clock in the morning, and they start their day, and they might fly 3 or 4 legs and end up in a city, overnight in that city. The next day they do the same thing, and they'll do that for about 4 days, and then on the 4th day they're done for the week, and then they go home. So
it's typical for a commercial pilot to work like 3 or 4 days a week total?
Well, I mean, for the average, yes. Yeah.
I guess it's a lot longer hours. It's not like you're not working a shift or anything.
Right. But you're gone, you're gone for from home, however many hours, 3 days or 4 days, whatever that might be, depending on when you start and finish. But yeah, it's a 3 or 4 days a week is the job.
Yeah, that's what makes it different than a normal job that works 5 days a week. Is even though you're working an office job like 5 days a week,
Yeah.
you're there every night.
Right.
And you're back home with your
back home.
family. Whereas you guys are out there and you're just gone
Right.
for 3 to 4 days potentially.
Right. And so, and there's limitations, just like truck driving, there's limitations on how many hours we can work in a day, in a week, in a month, in a year. And so they have to fit those schedules into all that. And so the more you fly in a day's time, the less amount of days you're going to work. So, and sometimes they can be long days. I mean, domestically, you might work a 14-hour day or a 15-hour day, and then you have a 10-hour overnight, and then you work another 15-hour day. So even though it's only 3 or 4 days, sounds good. But they can be very exhausting days sometimes.
With sleep, they got to be monitoring that pretty closely because
yes,
even though truckers, they have stops they can pull over to and they get cross-eyed or they're droopy-eyed.
Yes, we're responsible for monitoring our fatigue, our tiredness, and if we get to a point where we're not safe to fly, then we have a responsibility to tell the company we can't continue. And the company has to say, okay, we'll replace you.
Yeah.
There's some hoops you have to jump through to do that, but that's our responsibility as pilots, because you can't have 2 guys that are out there so tired that they miss something and end up hurting a bunch of people.
Yeah.
So yeah, it can be exhausting sometimes.
What if you got sick right before you're taking off, or even during the flight? Has that ever happened?
Oh yeah, we've had people. I hate to say guys because we have a lot of women pilots too.
Yeah.
We have pilots that will get sick once in a while in flight for whatever the reason might be.
You ate the fish.
Yeah.
The movie Airplane.
Yeah. It's usually not from the food. It's usually from something else.
Yeah.
Most of the time, it's never serious enough that you have to stop, make a landing someplace. But there has been times when that has happened, when somebody gets sick enough. And you always have a chance of somebody having a heart attack, a stroke. We've had pilots die in flight.
Wow.
And that can happen. I mean, these are all things that can happen. It's just like anything else.
Yeah.
So, but we're also trained if something does happen to the other guy, one guy can fly the airplane and land it, and just as safe.
That's why there's 2 of you.
That's why there's 2 of you. That's right.
You never want one dude up there flying the whole thing.
No. So,
do you guys have your own bathroom up there?
No, we don't have our own bathroom, but like on our airplane, we have sleeping bunks. So we have a place to go sleep. So anytime you get over 8 hours of flight time, you have to add a 3rd pilot. And so when we go to Europe, we have 3 pilots instead of 2 pilots. And so once you take off and you're up to altitude, then you figure out each guy maybe get a couple hours of break, and so you rotate out and you have a it's overhead, usually first class, and it's a couple bunks that you can go up and you can lay down and
that's
and rest.
Cool.
Yeah, and sleep. Because we have flights that are as much as 16 and 17 hours. So, and those flights require 4 guys. So you always have 2 guys on break once you're up at altitude. And so you got to have some place to sleep and rest. And we're flying at all hours of the night, and it can be, and you might take off in the morning in Australia, but it's the middle of the night here, or it's just about bedtime here, or a lot of times when I wake up in the morning in Europe to come back to the States, I'm getting up and it's 11 o'clock here.
Yeah.
There's been times where I've called my kids or my wife when I'm getting up to go to work, and they're just getting ready to go to bed.
Yeah.
So, and your body's still on that time frame a little bit. So it's a lot of adjustment when you're flying multiple time zones and stuff.
And passengers complain about jet lag. They're not even doing it every week like you guys.
Yeah. Yeah, you've got to learn to cope with it, and make sure that you don't become too fatigued. And it can manifest on itself, and you can get to the point where you're just like, I can't go anymore. So you have the responsibility to say that.
That's kind of weird because sometimes you're chasing the sun, right?
Oh yeah.
So you'll take off, and it's like, well, how would that work? I guess if you're coming from Europe to the States.
Well, you're taking off in the morning, and so it's daylight the whole way. Whereas when you're going to Europe, you're taking off in late afternoon. The sun goes down, and it's dark the whole night, and the sun comes up maybe a little before you land.
Yeah.
So it's a little
weird
for the international stuff. It's sometimes hard.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you're taking off at midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning from places, coming back to the States, and you just got to learn to cope with it. That's I'd say one of the more challenging things about the job is coping with that time frame thing. Now, the domestic guys that do domestic, they don't have that big of an issue, although, they're working long days and they're on the East Coast and then they're on the West Coast and then they're maybe, one morning in the Central and they're all over the place a little bit too, but it's not, it's only 3 or 4 hour time zone changes.
Yeah. There's a lot of flights that I've taken where it's just like an hour hop or 2 hour,
Yeah.
from like Wichita to Denver. You're talking like an hour.
Right.
And
so those guys that do that will go to Denver, and then from Denver they might go to Salt Lake City, and they might go to LA, and then they might go to Las Vegas from there, and that might be the end of their day. And then the next morning they get up and they go
come back
Las Vegas
to
Newark, to New York, and then down to Miami, and then maybe to Kansas City, and then they spend the night there. And then the next day they might go to South America someplace. I mean, so they're all over the place.
That schedule's already mapped out before they're taking off for the
Yes.
day, so they know exactly what's going on.
Yes, we get a schedule for a month at a time, so you know exactly your trip for the week, where it's going, what it's doing. Now, can it get changed? Can it get altered? Yeah, and it does sometimes.
You fly through a lot of storms?
You try not to fly through storms.
You try, but sometimes you're forced to, right?
Well, you don't fly through thunderstorms ever.
No.
Now, there's a fine line between what's a thunderstorm and just a rain shower. But we have radar in the airplane, and it's just like your radar you see on your phone. It's got red and yellows and greens and stuff, and so you stay out of the reds. You don't get into the reds.
So you can see that. You can see that all just like the radar.
We have radar on our screen
Okay.
with our map where we're going, and you don't ever go through the red.
That's kind of a relief because I think a lot of people think you're just up there looking through the window.
No. We have all the stuff because thunderstorms are extremely dangerous, even for a big airplane.
Yeah.
And back in the day when the radar wasn't as good, there were a few crashes that happened because they flew into thunderstorms that they shouldn't have been into, but their radar wasn't good enough really to tell them.
It's designed to take lightning strikes and stuff, though, right?
Oh yeah. Yeah, you can get hit by lightning once in a while, and we have static wicks that dissipate that off the back of the airplane, and they can do some damage once in a while. But for the most part, if you get hit, it's not a big deal.
But heavy rains aren't a big deal, are they? Because
No.
I've flown in some pretty heavy rain.
Yeah, no. As long as there's not the convective activity, you can fly in some pretty heavy rain. Yeah.
And if it's cloudy, that obviously doesn't affect you, but.
No.
So that's telling me that you're not really using the windshield at all for when you're flying, are you?
Well, no, you do, because you have visual cues that you want to look at too.
Yeah.
But if you're in the clouds, of course, you can't see anything and you're not looking out.
Then you're just basing it all off your instruments.
All off your instruments. Yeah, your radar and any other instruments we've got. Wind shear prediction on our airplanes that tells us what the wind is doing inside the storms and stuff. So, yeah. But if you're not in the clouds, you see what you see on the radar, and then you back it up visually, looking out the window, going, yeah, we don't want to go that way. We want to go this way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have you ever seen anything weird in the sky? Any UFOs or anything like that?
No, nothing weird, but we do occasionally get a good show of, say, like the Northern Lights.
Yeah.
I was just flying a trip a couple weeks ago, and they were as bright as I've ever seen them, and they were outstanding.
That's awesome.
So you get to see some stuff like that, some beautiful moonrises, sunrises, sunsets, those sorts of things. But nothing. I've never seen.
Never any saucers pulling up next to you?
No, no, I haven't had any of that.
I've seen some videos on the internet of passengers that have a video of like another plane that's going right below them or something like that.
Yeah.
Is that something that shouldn't be happening, or is that
No.
something that you already know about?
We already know about it.
You do?
Yeah. And usually when it's close enough, the air traffic controller will let you know that it's going to happen, that you got an airplane coming at you or whatever. and what altitude they're at. But our equipment in the airplane also can tell us
if something's close,
when something is coming, and then if there's a conflict, it will actually alert us that there's a conflict and that we need to do something. And it will talk to the other airplane. Our airplane will talk to the other airplane, and it'll coordinate. If there's a conflict, it'll tell him to descend, and it'll tell us to climb. So we don't. It doesn't. Both of us climb.
There's no mid-air collision.
Yeah.
So what if there's let me ask you this scenario. There's a person sitting there looking out the window. They see a plane and they freak out, have a heart attack, die in their seat. What do you do?
Well, I mean, you land and take them off the airplane. I mean, what else can you do? I mean, if they've died.
Do you keep them in the seat, or do you guys pull them off and put them?
Well, technically, nobody ever dies on the airplane because nobody on the airplane can legally pronounce them dead.
Oh, okay.
So nobody ever really dies.
Legally.
But if something happened to somebody, if something happens to somebody, we'll get the airplane on the ground as fast as we can to get them medical attention, even if they're incapacitated to the point where we don't know if they're dead or alive. And we have medical kits on board, and of course you always call for a doctor, and we have the ability we have a private service that we actually call, it's called MedLink, and we call them and we speak directly with a doctor, and they tell us what we should do for that patient.
Okay.
Whether we should land, whether we should give them something out of the medical kit, or what we should do with them. Yeah. So they kind of take the responsibility for calling all those shots. Yeah.
Let's say that somebody happened to get a knife on there, got through TSA somehow. They're holding it to the flight attendant, and they want access to the cockpit.
Yeah.
Is that going to happen, or is that for sure? No way you're letting it happen, no matter what.
It doesn't happen. They're not getting in. Not after 9/11. That would never happen again.
But you were flying pre 9/11, right?
Yes.
And back then, you always see on the movies and stuff I've heard about it too, about kids coming up to the pilots and you guys letting them in, and you're like, hey, you want to see how we fly the plane here?
Yeah. Yeah, there was some of that happened.
It's a normal thing.
Yeah. Yeah, but no more. I mean, we let kids come up when we're on the ground, and we're at the gate, and they can come up, and we'll invite them up if they're interested, and let them take a look and get a picture or something. But once the gate is off and the doors are shut, our door shuts, and
that's it.
That's it. No,
you're not letting anybody on, no matter what.
No matter what. Yeah.
For a good reason.
For a very good reason. Yeah.
But you do remember the days of opening the cockpit and stuff?
Oh yeah.
During the flight?
I remember flying with the door open.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Different world, man.
Totally. Yeah.
I remember, I'm young enough to remember, or old enough, to remember my dad flying pre 9/11, and we would go all the way to the gate, and when he walked out of the plane, we'd be standing up there when he came off, traveling for business or whatever.
Right.
And looking back at that now, I'm like, wow, that's crazy.
It's totally different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Weird.
Yep.
But I mean, being a pilot during 9/11, that would have been crazy too, right?
It was. Thank goodness I wasn't, the day that happened, I wasn't flying. I was supposed to be. I was supposed to be going to from Houston to Washington, D.C. And the night before it happened, I had gotten a phone call, and I needed to go to Austin, Texas, to get some paperwork signed. And so I called, and I got rid of my trip and let somebody else do my trip for me. So I was actually driving to Austin when it all happened.
Wow.
But I could have been, about the time the plane hit the Pentagon, I would have been landing in Washington, D.C.
Wow.
If I had stayed on the flight, yeah.
That would have been hectic.
Yeah, and I had friends that got stranded all over the world on that. I had friends that drove back to Houston from New York, from Seattle. I mean, because they couldn't get out. There was no planes flying. They couldn't go anywhere.
Super eerie. One of the only moments in history, modern history, where there were no planes in the air.
Yeah.
Nothing.
Yeah. And it was amazing how quickly they got everything out of the sky once they determined there was a problem. And they told the people that were flying, you've got to land immediately at this airport, and they didn't give them any choice. They said, you're landing immediately. And then so everybody had to go down and get on the ground, and it happened fairly quickly. So, and I think maybe that's good, because there might have been more planes.
Yeah. It definitely changed a lot of things.
Yeah, it did.
The way we travel.
Yeah, it did. Changed everything.
Yeah.
The way we travel. Yeah. So.
Huh. Well, some other things that people do that are stupid on planes. Let's see. Are you familiar with the Mile High Club?
Yeah, I've heard of it. I don't know anything about anybody joining the Mile High Club on my airplane, though. So I'm up in the cockpit. I don't deal.
You're not dealing with that.
I'm not dealing.
That's
with
the flight attendant.
That is the flight. That would be a flight attendant question. You'd have to get a flight attendant on here too.
I'm gonna have you get me one.
Yeah,
because they have a totally different experience than you.
They have a totally different. Yeah.
You're not dealing with the people, which is kind of a good aspect of it.
It really is. And after 9/11, it's even less now than it was back before that. I mean, we are not allowed to leave the cockpit for any reason if there's any kind of disturbance in the back of any sort. I mean, so we don't really deal with the people at all, other than maybe greeting them when they come on, greeting them when they go off, doing our PAs in our flight. Other than that, we don't really have much to do with them.
So if two people go into the bathroom together and they might be doing some dirty stuff, the flight attendants would tell them to go back to their seat or something like that?
They would, and yes. They would.
Simple answer, yes.
Yes. Yeah, that would be a flight attendant question. I think you'd have to bring that up with them.
Those poor flight attendants, man, they deal with a lot of stuff, especially with COVID and all that stuff.
It has been tough on them.
Yeah.
It has been very tough. And, passengers are now especially are getting tired of it, of the mask. I mean, I had my last flight last week. They had a guy they had to warn about 4 or 5 times to put his mask on. They finally had to give him, and I don't remember what they call it now, but they give him a sheet that he has to sign that says if he doesn't comply, he will be banned from the airline for the rest of his life. And he has to sign this. And then after that, he kept his mask on, and he didn't cause any trouble, and he was fine. And that's usually what happens.
Oh, it's actually not worth it to fight this.
Right. And I know their frustration. I mean, we have it too. We wear masks at the airport. We wear masks on the airplanes. It's frustrating right now for people, and so hopefully that's going to change soon, and we'll get back to a little bit of normalcy. And
hopefully, that'd be cool.
Yeah, but that's a lot of our passenger issues right now is the mask issue.
Yeah, those poor flight attendants.
Yeah, they take the brunt of it. But there's a lot of jobs within the airline industry. It's the flight attendants, it's the gate agents, it's rampers, and they all have their own specific jobs. I mean, those are all. A lot of them are career jobs that people do, and it'd be good to have them on and get their perspective of the business.
Yeah, I need to get a flight attendant on here. That'd be a really good job.
Yeah, I think it'd be very interesting.
Yeah,
for you.
for sure.
Yeah.
But let's see. Are there any misconceptions about being a pilot that you have to deal with or you hear from other people?
I think the only thing I would maybe say would be a lot of people think that we're just jetting off to some exotic place and getting to have a little vacation and then jetting off back, and it's not like that at all.
People misconceive that it's a cush lifestyle, just cruising around.
Just cruising around. You're not doing much.
Going to Fiji for a week.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think some people think that, and so that's probably the biggest misconception. Yeah.
Let's talk about younger people or older people, I guess, that are getting a late start that want to get into being a pilot. What's the journey like going from nothing to being a commercial pilot?
Well, okay, so right now it's expensive. That's the first thing. It is expensive, but it's a little easier road today than it was maybe 20, 25, 30 years ago. So we have a pilot shortage. And it's going to get worse before it gets better because we have so many people going to retire. So many pilots are going to retire over the next 5 to 8 years.
So it's like other jobs in that sense, that there's a lot of older people, you could call them baby boomers maybe even, that are just getting out of it?
Yes. So
and younger people aren't filling those spots as fast?
Yes. Yeah, I think that's a big part of it is that more people are retiring than there are people starting their career. For a long time, it was really hard to get into, and so people kind of put it off. It's very expensive, to go to a school and get all your ratings and your education, it might be $150,000 or more.
Really?
Yeah, it's very
Wow.
expensive. And then when you come out, there was really no real defined road to success, you might say. Whereas maybe today that's a little easier because the shortage is starting to happen. There are more people going to flight schools. I just talked to somebody the other day. K-State has a big aviation program, and he said that, and his son is thinking about being a pilot, and his son has said that their enrollment is way up. So I think people are starting to get into it, but it takes a long time to go from zero to an airline pilot. I mean, it's a lot of flight hours, it's a lot of education, it's a lot of building your time, and then the jobs sometimes don't pay all that well coming out of school. And so you've got to kind of pay your dues. But if you know you're going to get hired at a major airline in the end run, it's all well worth it because it's a very good career from that point on. The money is good, the benefits are good, the schedule is good, and all of those things. So, you go to school, it takes 4 years, and you got to build some time. You might teach or you might fly pipeline. I'm not even sure how guys build their time anymore, but you need about 1,500 hours before you can go and get hired by a commuter airline that flies a little turboprop. And then you get there and you fly maybe 2 to 5 years there and build your time there, and then you're qualified to move up to a what would I'd say a major airline, a United, a Delta, FedEx, American, Southwest.
So you're looking at close to 10 years before you reach the point where you can fly for a major airline?
You might be looking at 8 to 10, maybe a little faster right now. I mean, we have a program at United called the Aviate Academy, and that's where we are taking people really off the street, and we have our own flight school, and we're teaching them how to fly. And then once they have graduated from the academy, then they go to a commuter one of our commuters that feeds us. Mm-hmm. They go work for them for whatever amount of time they need to get their hours, and then from there, then they have a job with United, which is a great deal for somebody starting out, because they know they have the job.
So it's all kind of planned out for you.
It's all
in
planned
advance.
out in advance.
Yeah,
and
that's
they know,
nice.
Now, with that said, things happen in the airline business that, something could happen tomorrow and we need half as many pilots as we have today. COVID hit, and if it wasn't really for the federal government giving the airlines money to survive, most of them would have died, and most of us would have been out of work. And so that's a pretty extreme, but things happen over time that we have to lay off pilots.
Yeah.
Right now we're in a big hiring boom, but in a year from now, something could. After 9/11, we laid off, 2,500 people, pilots. So all those guys that thought they had a great career going, all of a sudden were laid off with no job at all. So, and that's what can happen in this business. And it's when that happens, it's happening to everybody. So it's not like you can say, okay, well, I got laid off from this airline, I'll just go over to this airline and work. When it's happening to one, it's happening to all of them. So it makes it kind of tough.
Is that the case though for like private pilot jobs that aren't commercial flights or anything, or not even like FedEx or UPS, but like, let's say personal jet pilots?
Yeah, so like when I worked for the oil company, that's like a private company. You're flying for them, but they're a little bit. It's a little bit the same. I mean, their aviation department costs that company a lot of money. Planes are expensive, and they're expensive to maintain, and they're expensive to operate. And so if the company is losing money, I know many flight departments that have shut down and left their pilots stranded without jobs. So it can happen in that business too. Fortunately, over my career, I've never been laid off. I've never been furloughed. Came close, but I've never had to experience that. But a lot of guys I know have, and it's tough. So it can happen whether you're flying for a company, whether you're flying for an airline. It can happen anywhere.
What's the normal career look like for a commercial pilot? Like, is there a certain point you hit that you get a full retirement out of it? Do they give you 401k matching and all that?
Each airline is a little bit different.
Yeah.
Let's see. So at United, we have a program kind of like a 401k. It's a defined contribution plan. We used to have pension plans, and then after 9/11, when all the airlines went bankrupt, they kind of got rid of all the pension plans, and so they were gone.
Pensions are hard to find anywhere anymore.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, they almost don't exist.
Used to be normal.
Right.
Back in the old days.
Right. Used to be normal. You had a pension. You worked for your company for 30 years. You retired. You had your pension. So now it's up to you to save, and that's the way we are. It's a defined contribution plan, but it's a very well funded. They put in a pretty good percentage of our pay into this fund. You control it just like a 401k. And if a guy does it right, he should end up retiring with plenty of money to retire on.
Yeah.
Yeah. But we don't have anything else as far as retirements go, any other vehicles really.
What about as far as health and stuff? Is there a certain age where you have to retire?
Right now at 65 years old, you have to retire from the airline business, yes. It used to be 60, but I think maybe 8 or 9 years ago they changed that, and they went to 65.
Do they check your eyesight or anything like that?
Oh yeah, we do.
Regularly?
We do a physical twice a year. Once a year when you get to be my age, once a year you'd have to do an EKG. You know, you do your sight and your heart.
Yeah.
And you do all those things. Yeah. So you do physicals twice a year, and you got to pass them. And they're not a huge obstacle, but once in a while some guy will get caught up in one and have something found, and probably shouldn't be flying if they find something.
So 65, huh?
Yeah, 65. There's talk that they're going to raise that. They're always thinking about raising it, I guess. I don't know. 65 is good for me. That's plenty.
You don't want to be like the people in Washington, D.C. that work till they're 90?
No. I'll have a hard time making it to 65 probably.
Yeah.
I love my job, don't get me wrong, but after doing it for 40-some years, I'm almost done.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
I think most people probably agree that 65 or, how often do you want to see even an 80-year-old driving a car?
Right.
And much less fly a plane.
Right, exactly. Right.
So, yeah, that's probably a good thing.
Yeah.
But that's crazy. So, you're basically in school for upwards of 8 years till...
Well, it's not really school. I mean,
like
it's
4 years of it's school.
4 years.
Pretty much, right?
So I kind of equate it almost to a little bit of what a doctor might have to do. The doctor goes, and we don't do quite as much schooling, but once you're out, you got to do your residency. You got to pay your dues. You got to get on the job and actually learn how everything works then. And then you got to build your time, and so you're getting paid at those jobs. It's not like you're not getting paid. So really 4 years at a university, you come out, or you can go to an aviation academy, and you might even get done in less than 4 years. But then you got to build your time, and that can, like I said, that can take a little bit of time to do.
The whole time you're flying, though, so person going in to be a pilot, they're probably thrilled to be flying at all.
Right.
So at least you're on the job flying.
Yes.
Even if it's smaller planes and for less money.
Right.
You're still doing it.
You're still doing it, and everybody knows that's what you've got to do. And their jobs are still enjoyable. It's just that it's not your end goal job.
It's probably more fun flying a small plane, isn't it?
Sometimes.
It's like a small car. You get into a little go-kart type car. And you can feel it more. It's exciting.
And some of the funnest flying I did was I worked for the oil company. And so, I flew 4 or 5 different types of airplanes. And one of them was only a 6-seat airplane. But I loved flying the airplane because it was almost like a little sports car.
Yeah.
It was fast, and it was lightweight, and very maneuverable. And it was a fun airplane.
You feel more in control.
Yeah. You get to a big airplane like what we have, and it's, they're just like a big truck, It's like you just kind of lumbering along, and there you go. They're all good. Don't get me wrong. And anybody that wants to be a pilot really has to love flying. That's the first requisite, because there is some downside to it. I mean, it's a 7-day-a-week job, 365 days a year. You're working some holidays. You're gone from your family a lot, and it's got to be something that you love. But if you love it, it doesn't really matter whether you're flying and teaching in a 152 or you're flying a 747 around the world. They all have their benefits. They all have their joys about them. And most people that do it, they do it because this is what they love to do. A lot of the guys I work with, they own their own airplanes. So when they go home from work, they go fly their own airplanes.
That's awesome.
And
That's
some
so
of them have
cool.
2 or 3 airplanes, and some of them fly different types of stuff, And so really, this is a job where you gotta love to do what you're doing, and and when you do, it's not really a job anymore. I've never hated going to work ever.
Yeah.
In this job. I've had jobs before where I didn't necessarily want to go to work, because I thought, oh, this is going to be a horrible day. And this job is not like that anyway for me.
No, I mean, it seems fun in a way.
It is. It's different every day. It's a constant challenge because you've got so many things you're dealing with, and nothing's ever the same from day to day, trip to trip. Even though you might be going the same place, there's different things that happen on each and every flight.
Right.
Different things you have to deal with, different things you've got to take care of, different challenges that you gotta meet. So
how many people get to say that they're in Kansas and then when they go to work they're in Germany?
Yeah.
Same day.
The same day. That's right. My kids they don't even think twice about it anymore. They just say, Dad, where are you going today? And I'm like, well, I'll be in London tonight. And okay, well, have a good trip. We'll talk to you tomorrow or something. And so they don't even think about it, but it is quite a feat to leave Kansas and end up in someplace like that night.
Yeah.
Or the next morning, I should say.
So one of the benefits then also is that you can fly in your personal life too, right?
Yeah.
Once you become a pilot, you can take people up in a plane if you want to, or go rent a plane?
I can go rent a plane. I could own a plane. I mean, I don't do much of that myself, but a lot of guys do. A lot of guys own airplanes. A lot of guys will go rent airplanes. It's an expensive hobby. It's not cheap.
But if you wanted to take your family to California for vacation,
sure,
you could rent a plane and fly them there?
Yeah, you could.
That's awesome.
But I could also go out and hop on one of our airplanes, and we could all fly out there.
And then you don't have to do any work.
We don't have to do anything, and I can enjoy myself a little bit. But yes, you could rent an airplane, or if you owned an airplane, we have guys that travel like that a lot. They have their own airplanes, and they'll fly all over the country, going places and doing things.
Yeah, it's so cool.
Yeah.
It's one of my dreams, be able to grab like 3 buddies and say, hey, let's go to Vegas tonight.
There you go.
Fly a little 4-seater.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Problem is when you get that small airplane, it takes a long time to get to Vegas. So, but it would be fun to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you have any other advice or anything you'd give to somebody out there that's considering being a pilot?
Well, make sure that you like to fly.
Mm-hmm.
Go if you're thinking about it. We have introductory flights that they do at flight schools, and you can go out and take an introductory flight. Most people that I know that go and try it, either they love it and they say this is it, or they go
or they're freaked out.
Yeah, this isn't for me. And so you learn, pretty fast whether you like it. And so every once in a while I'll have a young kid come up and want some advice on what to do and talk about how to do it and everything. And most of them that come up, and I'll say, go take an introductory flight and then let me know what you think. And most of them, by the time they get back, they are ready to go.
Yeah.
They say, this is it. And that's kind of the way I was. I mean, I had a friend take me up when I was about 8 years old, and I just, after that, I was like, wow, this is great.
Yeah.
So I just say make sure that that's what you want to do, because it's expensive, and there sometimes is a tough road to get into it and go. But if you're willing to make those sacrifices, it's a great career.
So go on some flights first before you decide to pull the trigger on making a career.
And if you're not sure, you can always work on you could fly 10 hours with an instructor and kind of learning, and you'll know pretty fast. Whether or not it's something you want to do. And a lot of people will go maybe get their private pilot's license and they go, oh, that's enough. I don't really want to do it as a career. I got my private pilot's license, I can go rent an airplane and I can go fly. And that's good enough. So, but if a young person wants to get into it and go, find a good school and get enrolled and get started.
Now, people that don't want to fly, on the other hand, that are afraid to get on your airplane as a passenger.
Yeah.
what's your advice to them? Do you have anything to say to somebody like that that's just
it's
freaked out?
It's safer than your drive to the airport, and it really is.
Yeah.
I mean, you have a better chance of dying in a vehicle crash than you do in an airplane crash. And we have people that will get on sometimes, and you can just tell they're
just
scared.
oh.
Yeah. And so I always try to take them and talk to them and just kind of reassure them it's good. And most of the time, as a pilot, if we do that to a passenger that we can tell is really struggling, they have a tendency to believe us and to put their mind to ease a little bit.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of a part of our job, is to kind of watch for those people and maybe try to help them a little bit if we can.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Coming on over the intercom and having that smooth, calm pilot's voice.
Right. And that tends to calm people down. And yeah.
Like, luggage just fell out of the upper luggage carriers, and you get on and you're like, well, we had a few bumps back there, but should be a smooth flight from here on
right
out.
That's right. And then they're good.
Yep.
Yeah.
Any last words, Kurt?
Well, it's a great career. I've enjoyed it. I've been flying for 40 years. Don't regret a day of it. If somebody wants to travel, wants adventure, wants a challenge, it's a great job.
Could be your career.
Yeah, it could be your career. Yeah. Come and join us, because we're looking for people all the time, and if you get started now, I think you've got a great career ahead of you.
Yep.
Yep.
And you'll be flying the whole time through all the schooling and your sort of pilot's residency.
Yep.
Yeah. So that's
you're flying the whole time, and once you're out of school, you're getting paid to fly, and you may not make a ton of money to start with, but if you're patient, the once you get to the majors, the pay and the benefits are well worth anything you have to give up, to get there. So
right on.
All right.
Yeah. Thanks for keeping everybody safe, Kurt.
Well,
thanks for getting people back and forth, destination to destination. And,
that's our job.
Keeping people calm.
Yeah.
So, cheers to you.
Cheers
on all your years of experience, and
thank you.
I wish you a happy retirement when that day comes too.
Hopefully sooner than later. All right.
All right. Thanks, Kurt.
Yep,
Cheers.
Thank
man.
you. Cheers.